But Mike, I invite you to take over the microphone and introduce your panel, and we can get going. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. It's really a pleasure to be here this afternoon. Our topic is good feet and legs, genetics and management. Certainly anybody who works with dairy cows, especially on a daily basis, knows the importance of good feet and legs, managing for good feet and legs, breeding for good feet and legs. And I think our panel that we have assembled on the topic will each bring a unique and very deep level of experience in their perspective. I'm going to introduce the panel first, and then I'll invite each one of the speakers to share their thoughts with you. Then at the end of the three presentations, we'll open it up to questions, and hopefully you can pick these people's brains a little bit because they've got a lot to share with us. To my immediate left is Dick Wright. Dick is a former Holstein breeder and classifier from Stanley, New York. He was a third-generation breeder with his family's Elbank Farm herd. Dick graduated from SUNY Cobleskill in 1966 and married his wife Nancy in 1976. Nancy is here with us today. Dick farmed with his parents in eastern New York until he and his family moved to Stanley in 1987. Dick bred the bull Elbank Airliner. The herd was listed on Holstein Association USA's Progressive Breeder Registry for 17 years. And together, Dick and Nancy were recognized as New York State Holstein Master Breeders. Nancy is very active with the New York State and National Holstein Scholarship programs. The Elbank herd was dispersed in September of 2004, and in January of 2006, Dick began his second career as a Holstein classifier, retiring last May. Dick and Nancy have two children, Lynette, a Cornell Cooperative Extension educator in Oswego County, and Andrew, the small grains manager at Hanson Farms, LLC in Stanley. And Andrew and his wife, Erica, are expecting twins due in November. These will be Dick and Nancy's first grandchildren. Our second speaker is Joyce Thomas. Joyce is the eldest of 10 children. She grew up on her family's Parkview, Jersey farm in Lowville, which is in Lewis County. She began her showing career through 4-H and is still involved somewhat at home on the farm, which is owned by her brother and her sister. For 27 years, Joyce worked in banking as a program analyst. But 9 years ago, she made the career move to become a full-time hoof trimmer. Her son's show cow, Lady Home Dana, 94-point Jolt, was injured, and Joyce began to prospect on how to save this cow. And that kind of progressed into the idea of somehow hydraulically lifting this cow, and then in January of 2005, Joyce took a Riley-built class in Pennsylvania on hoof trimming. And there she determined that that was what she wanted to, and she could do, and she became a full-time hoof trimmer. Today she works with about 30 herds regularly on hoof management, in addition to assisting with show strings throughout the show season. And to my far left, our third speaker will be Brad Cates. Brad is from Covale Holsteins in Preble, married to his wife Sarah. Covale is a commercial dairy that milks about 450 cows with a rolling herd average well over 30,000 pounds of milk, 1,100 pounds of fat. The herd is consistently ranked near the top for BAA herds of its size in the United States, around the figure of 107%. In addition to being one of Cortland County's foremost dairymen and leaders in producing quality milk year after year, the Covale prefix has been attached to a long list of All-American and All-Canadian show winners. And the Covale show string has a reputation for having outstanding tan bark campaigners year after year after year. Brad was recognized as the 2010 New York Holstein Active Master Breeder and lives up to that reputation every day. In addition to his work at home, Brad has judged numerous shows at various levels, is very active in the local community, his local milk co-op, and local Holstein club. So those are our three speakers. I'm going to turn the microphone over first to Dick Wright, who will speak to us from the standpoint of a breeder and a classifier. Dick has prepared a handout which is going to be distributed now.
I'll just wait a minute for that to get handed out. Okay, I guess they're almost all out. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be on this panel on feet and legs. When Ed Tyler called me and asked me to do this, I was a little hesitant because I live less than 25 miles from here, so I'm not really an expert, but I'll give you my lifetime experiences on feet and legs. In the 7 years that I was on the road as a Holstein classifier, I've seen thousands of cows in all different situations. For me, good feet and legs comes down to one thing, and that's management. It doesn't matter whether you milk 30 cows or 3,000 cows, proper management is the most important thing. To me, that management should include one, assigning a key person to watch for sore-footed cows. Because a cow that isn't putting weight on one foot is then stressing the other 3 feet, especially if it's a hind foot. I want to quote an article in the Farmshine magazine recently by the Mid-America veterinarians. Nothing can ruin a cow faster than a sore foot. Lameness conservatively costs the average farm $90 per cow per year. And unfortunately, is one of the jobs that's most easily procrastinated. We treat cows for mastitis when first noticed. The same should hold true for feet and legs. Number 2 would be control of heel warts with proper use of foot baths. One of the things that I've noticed is that the longer foot bath seems to work better. They have to walk through it longer. 10 foot or so on a foot bath, there's no way they can avoid the foot bath. Proper trimming, and that's going to be addressed by Joyce, so that's all I'm going to say on that. And then the use of higher type foot and leg bulls. There again, you can use the best foot and leg bulls, but you have to use good management to keep them that way. So when storing cows, the things that we stress for correct feet and legs, and I'll refer to the handouts here. If the one with Yeah, we have the foot angle one, right? Would be the foot angle. The one over on the right, which is a 45. These are pretty good indications, but they're not the best indications. But the 45 and 35, you want a steep foot angle. In other words, the distance from the back of the hoof to the ground should be as high as you can. The number 5, that's when both the back of the foot and sometimes the dew claw are right on the ground. So we prefer the 35 and the 45. Next, it's rear legs. And I'm going to refer to the first one, the one on locomotion. We prefer when the hind cow moves forward, we like the hind foot to follow the same path as the front foot. The farther out from that, the worse her locomotion is going to be, the more likely she is to slip. So we like that rear foot to follow the front foot when she's walking right along. And that's what the locomotion is. And then the legs from the side, there again, these are pretty good indications of a really set cow is a 45, and a cow that's really straight-legged. The straight-legged cow is not really straight-legged, but it gives you a pretty good indication. So that would be a 5 on our scoring. So when you look at, if you use the red book, to the right is going to be the set leg, to the left is going to be the straight leg. The hock should be clearly molded and free of any coarseness and puffiness with adequate flexibility. You like to see that hock flex when she moves. The bone needs to be flat and clean with adequate substance. There again, the size of the cow would depend a little bit on that, but you see a nice clean bone, but yet enough bone for the size of the cow. And the pastures should be short and strong with some flexibility. I'd like to talk a little bit about housing and exercise. I've traveled much of the eastern half of the country while storing cows and have seen many different types of housing. My preference would be a freestall barn with grooved floors with an outside exercise area. The exercise is important to the health of the cow's feet and legs, even if it is only for an hour or two. I judged a show in Argentina once, and while there we visited several farms that had to walk a long ways to go to pasture. And the dairyman commented that you had to have good feet and legs for the cows to walk. And I commented to him that because they walk a long ways, they have good feet and legs. And I think that's important to have some exercise for the cows. I grew up and continued to milk in a tie stall barn. But for leg health, it is important to be mindful of cow comfort, whether you're a tie stall barn or a large freestall barn. And this cow comfort is in both stall design, bedding, floors, and again, exercise. There are so many new types of stalls out there. In fact, I was right next door before I came in, and they have a new stall that combines a gel and air in a center thing that's covered with a mattress type material, and it seemed pretty soft to me. But they're always coming up with different ideas, so I would talk to different dairymen on what they like and have experience with. My first choice for bedding it would be sand. Sand seems to be very popular no matter where you go. I've even seen it work in a tie stall barn. It takes a little more work, but I have seen it work there. I'm not a big fan of slotted floors. I've seen lots of herds that with slotted floors just have more issues with feet and legs. That's not to say that if you have slotted floors and manage them well, that it can't work for you. And also in my travels, I found that some of the best feet and legs herd will trim cows when they go dry, and then get them out on some kind of where they can get exercise and out on dirt. In summary, I'd like to go back to my main point of managing feet and legs. Whether you have a show herd, commercial herd, or breeding for genomics, milking 50, 500, or 3,000. Good feet and legs is the most important factor in the longevity in your herd, and careful management is the most important thing on feet and legs. Thank you.
Dick. Second speaker is Joyce Thomas.
I'd also like to thank Ed and Dairy Business. You see, I've done this a lot. I'd like to also thank Ed Tyler and Dairy Business for asking me to do this. This is definitely an honor, considering that I consider myself a behind the scenes, getting the cows ready and then letting them go. Before I became a hoof trimmer, I definitely didn't look at feet very much. It was always that nice uphill run, deep rib, nice rear udder. After 9 years, if they don't have feet, there would be a difference from first or second to fourth or fifth at the bottom, because if they don't walk, they can't milk, they can't eat. And the Dana cow is a perfect example. If we didn't have a problem, she would still be here. So my first goal when I do feed is that they go on the table and they come off walking as if I put them on, only better. I treat every cow that goes on the table as if they own my own. I probably over-medicate because I don't want to have to come back to that same cow. I would prefer that she came to me like 6, 7 months later, or 2 or 3, depending on the environment. The best results I see is when the manager of the farm and my client, nutritionist, and myself see the cows, see their feet, and we alternate what we do with the cow. We also alter the feed, depending on if we see a little laminitis or other issues in the feet. When I go to places, what I see is like a grazing and grass-fed cows are definitely the most healthy. Less medication always seems to be working. I don't know what that means, but that's the organic side. I don't know if that means more corn and protein causes issues as you get into the free stalls where they're pushing cows 3 to 4 times, milking some of them, depending on if they're in a robotic. You do see more laminitis and more feed issues. And that's where the nutritionist and the foot trimmer get together and they back off what they are feeding the cows in order to correct the foot. It immediately goes to the foot. Any problem with the cow goes right to the foot. I had a cow on the table once that I went to the dry cow lot to get her because they overfed corn that they wasn't going to feed to the milkers. They dumped it to the dry cow. It went right to the feed. We actually saved her, but she was never going to show again. But they did get some embryos out of her and continued the breeding. Free stalls, I like mats and sawdust, which is probably completely opposite of the norm. Sand, you cannot do any corrective work on. Normally you don't have much trimming. And if you do nick them at all, it takes a whole lot longer to get them back because there is so much abrasiveness I've also seen if they don't routinely put their sand in, that their somatic count also goes up. So it's still a management issue with the feed, you know, and the bed. It's not just sand isn't always the answer. Tie stalls, that's what I'm from, so I like it. When I started trimming feed, all of a sudden I realized that freestalls were nice, easy. Created more work for myself. The feed is softer, and you can do them 2 to 3 times a year. Tie stalls, you get away with once or twice. When I was growing up, we always had to do them in February and March before we went snowmobiling, and had to let the cows out in April. So, pack bounds give me a lot of work. They grow fast, a lot on the bottom, the cows are uncomfortable quicker. We're in a freestall and tight stall grass, they stay corrected longer. Breed heifers, I think that's one thing that a lot of people overlook is the need to breed, to trim heifers. I had a hoof trimming client that we did 120, 130 heifers, and probably 10 of them could have had issues with their feet before they even came into the milking barn. So that's one thing I know a lot of people don't do. I sort of prove it to a couple of clients every now and then that I'll do 2 or 3. You compare them with the ones that you didn't want to do, and you tell me which ones you want, which way works better for you. You got to see it to make them change. And 100% of the time so far, I've gone back and done the rest of the heifers, and some of them have offered to pay for those, and I says, no, I don't need that. I've got you to do your heifers. And the goal is to make heifers into cows and longevity. So I'm a small piece of that puzzle. Breeds, Jerseys, Ashers, and Brown Swiss normally have the best feed. The feet always seem to be harder and stay shaped correctly longer. Holsteins, softer, and maybe it's the genetics, as Dick has said, that they're breeding their cows. I'm going to throw Durham and Goldwyn under there that create very narrow-chested cows, so they're not comfortable with the rest of the bone structure. So it gives us more work as hoof trimmers. Beef, their feet are sound, normally you just have to take a little off the outsides. What I see is that beef still does have to be done if they go to the shows, but not to the degree that the dairy cows are. I also like, what I treat cows with is the typical tetracycline, copper. I use a lot of cotton and wraps. I know there's a discussion out there whether you don't have to do any wrapping on warts. I've done some of the work on some of my larger clients where I've actually just brushed it on and walked away, and the cow comes back the next time around. If they're large. If they're small, you can get away with it. What I've also done in that same brushing, because I just feel I have to do something else, I put blue coat or that aluminum shield so that the medicine actually stays on the wart. That's the biggest destruction of cows is warts, because I believe it goes under the heels, it goes in the soles, it goes up the leg. It's the enemy of all of us. I use iodine, and I use a lot of natural blocks versus regular blocks. I don't want to walk on a large piece of stone or powder film, so I try to use the cow's other side. I won't touch it at all, even though it might need it, and take out the ulcer and abscess, and then wrap it. I'd rather medicate the first time around, and then the next week, if it's not any better, then block it. Freestalls, not as easy. Sometimes I have to go do what I don't want to do and block it the first time around. Tie stalls, you can get away with it because they don't have to get in their food. The food is already delivered to them with water, where the freestall is forced to walk. Different styles of trimming that I use commercial trimming, what I consider is you just make the cow off the bottom and short, let them go. I use that with a lot of high cows because we're already under a lot of stress, so they don't really need to be put under any more stress. You just make them comfortable until they get a little further adaptation. Show cows, I like to trim 4 to 6 weeks before they go to the show and then retrim them maybe 2 to 3 weeks just to do the corrective work. You can do more corrective work on a tie-stall cow than you can on a freestall cow. There's more room. You don't have any room on a commercial cow or a freestall cow because they have to move. A tie-stall cow, you can correct closer, let them stand, bandage, and let it go, and it will work. Older cows, you just want to make them comfortable. There's no sense of going into an old wound. You already know it's been there. We've done this with a couple of cows where, I have actually dug them all out, and it's actually made it worse, and we ended up sending her to beef. That was the biggest thing that I've had to learn in 9 years, is telling the customer that I don't think I can fix them. Because when I started trimming, I thought you could fix every cow. I thought you could fix every corrected, wicked, hocked-in heifer possible. The bone structure doesn't allow you to. A little, but not a lot. Future plans for myself is I want to continue trimming until I'm 80. I just talked to an old friend that says he had a customer who's still doing it for up to 82, 15, 16 cows. I can do anywhere from 10, 5 or 6. I have done 80 cows a day. Do I want to do 80 cows a day? No. 2 or 3 days each week? Okay. And less wrapping. Since I've been trimming, I cut my wraps in half, and that's just based on routine trimming between the client allowing me to have these cows continually, so that you do them more than once or twice. If you say you want a cow back, it's the client that's got to pay to have you put it on. So it's a three-way informational, and you work together in order to do it. So fantasy trimming some days, not to do any wrapping. Put them up and let them go. So thank you.
I'd like to thank our sponsors and Joel. Let's give them a round of applause there. This is quite a deal. I'm Brad Cates from Coville Holsteins, and they really didn't give us a lot of guidance on what they wanted us to talk about today. And I hope afterwards there's a lot of questions. I'm just going to kind of go through what sore feet or what feet and legs mean to me and Coville Holsteins on a commercial basis and on a show cow basis also. And I was very fortunate when I was younger. I had plantar warts when I was a kid, and I struggled with those. We kept going to the doctor, getting one off, getting another one off, and then finally we got the main one off, and they all disappeared. But during those days, this was before heel warts, so I kind of learned what heel warts really felt like, and it's really helped me manage our feet and legs on our dairy significantly. And just recently, a year or so ago, I had trouble with the knee, and I noticed when I was at the orthopedic office, a lot of parents would bring their sons and daughters in, and they'd have a swollen knee or something, and it was just awful. It was like the end of the world. But I've also visited a lot of farms where they'll have a little swelling in their hock, a little fluid there, and you'll say to the owner, you'll say, well, you got a problem there, and they'll say, oh, no, she gets to the parlor all right. I said, well, if that was your son or daughter, I don't think they would. I said, I think it's, and it just makes me be aware in our own dairy of the significance of the pain that these cows go through if they have a little swelling. And I judge a lot of shows throughout the U.S., and you'll see a lot of cows at the county fairs that'll have swelling in their legs, and this isn't right. It's not the way the cow is supposed to be. And I did a little research yesterday on this, since it was time to do this talk today, and between 20 and 25% of all cows in the U.S. are lame. Boy, that's a significant number when you really think about it, to have that many cows that have something wrong with their feet and legs. And I kind of went I started at that point, and I looked at what we did at our farm, and I'm going to tell you what we do, and we'll go from there. And hopefully at the end we'll look at some questions about different things. And I'm very fortunate because the two speakers ahead of me, they covered about everything I had to say. We'll keep it short. We're going to start out with genetics. For years we've used only bulls that have 2 points of type on feet and legs. And I guess we kind of take that for granted now because we are fortunate to have that for so many years. But it sure shows up in our herds to use the good feet and leg bulls. There's enough bulls out there now where you can do that, and it won't sacrifice your production, it won't sacrifice anything. So I'd highly recommend that as a goal, is to use a 2-point foot and leg bull. As far as trimming goes, we have a little different program than most people. We trim our calves when they come out of the hutches. At 60 days old, when we wean them, we vaccinate them, we trim their feet. We take the outsides off. And since we started, we've been doing this now for about 10 years. And since we started that, it's really kept our heifers very correct in their foot structure. And then the next time we trim them, it'll be just prior to calving. We want to trim our unfresh 2-year-olds just before they calve. And then once they calve, and all cows get trimmed at 150 days in milk. And then we trim them again when we dry them off. So a cow will get trimmed twice a year, and I guess to maybe stop at this point right here, when you hire a trimmer, just because they're a foot trimmer doesn't mean they're any good. I'm sure Joyce is very good, but be careful. I mean, we've been very fortunate in our area to have an excellent foot trimmer. You want to talk to your veterinarians, and it's so easy to tell if a guy's a good foot trimmer or not by how many times he has to come and do your cows. If he's coming and doing most of them and doing them right on schedule, which on our sized area with the computer, we have a regular schedule trimming on them, then he's doing a good job. If he's coming in and doing the same sore-footed cows every time, you better relook at a foot trimmer, because there's quite a difference, and there's a lot of them out there that aren't very good. And that goes right from cleanliness of their equipment to how they handle the cows. I've known Joyce all my life, and I'm sure that she handles the cows really well. But there's a lot of guys that they can do a good job trimming, but they aren't good with the cows, and that really bothers me. So once that's said, on our farm we use a 10 by 3 foot bath, and we do that 3 times a week. We feel that's very important. We do use formaldehyde in our foot bath with the proper equipment to handle it. I think that's very significant too. You don't want to have any of your employees getting sick because of it. There was a time there when they said 2 foot baths were better than one to wash and one form to walk through. I think the most important thing about a foot bath is keeping them clean. You want to run about 200 cows through it, you want to change it. And really, when it comes to feet and most other things, cleanliness is very important. You want to keep the floors dry and clean. There's been a big discussion on how the floors are grooved on these new freestalls, the bigger barns. You don't want it to stand. You want the floors cut. You want a 3/8 inch wide groove, 3 inches on center. That way, a cow wants to walk on a flat surface. They don't want to walk on a rounded surface. This really makes a significant difference on how long their feet hold up. And probably the most important thing is cow comfort. If these cows are off their feet, they're going to get rested. It's no different than when we go to State Fair or we walk around here all day. When we go home, it seems good to get in that recliner or couch or whatever you happen to get in. You got to think of the cow the same way. When she's out there making 100 pounds of milk, which they are on most of these farms, they need to lie down. They need to get off those feet, and they need to lie down in a stall that's the right size for them. They need to have proper ventilation. They need to be cool. You see a lot of cows as you travel around that are under a lot of heat stress. A cow will stand with her back feet on the floor and front feet up in the stall. And when a cow's under stress, that's what, if you see a lot of that in your herd, that's what it's from. It's from stress of one manner or another. So you want to go with a lot of ventilation, a lot of dry bedding, proper stall sizes, misters. We're really big on misters for our herd. We like to keep the cows cool. And to kind of finish up on this, because like I said, they did a very good job ahead of me, is it all comes down to management. we got to manage these cows so that when they're out there making 100 pounds of milk and making you your money so you can buy new tractors and you can have all the nice things in life, we got to take care of these cows just if they're your wife or your daughter or any of that. And, I think it's very, very important for cow comfort. You get the cow comfort, you won't have foot problems. Thank you.
Well, thank you to all of our speakers. Certainly a lot of experience at this table. All three of these folks have worked with cows their entire lives, and I think from each of their standpoints, they had a lot to share with us. We'd like to open it up to questions now. If anything that they've mentioned has generated some thoughts in you, or if something that they haven't brought up that you've got a question about.
Brad, you mentioned that you trim the outsides of the calves' feet when you wean them. So, speak into it. You mentioned you trim the outsides of the calves' feet when you wean them. Do you have to trim them again before they come into the milking herd, or is that your one time that you hit them?
We do trim them again just before they calve. But we don't have, like before we used to have the calves that come out of the pack barn or greenhouse or hutches, and you have to catch them when they were yearlings. It's quite a task. And this way we're moving them anyway with a halter. We take a chisel, we cut the outside off. We don't have any problems again. Really. No, we don't take any problems.
Questions about managing the misters in the summertime.
We don't change anything. We use the foot bath the same. I kind of worry about it because there's all that moisture in there, but the cows are so much cooler and they're so much happier that I think that it equals up.
We have plenty of time. There's no reason to rush off if you have questions.
One of the things I've wondered about is what each of you has observed in the last 10 years. You know, what changes have you seen in terms of cows' feet and legs? Are we making progress in general? Are we losing ground? No pun intended.
The biggest thing I've seen in the last 10 years is we're feeding our cows a lot better. We're balancing for amino acids, and we're not feeding all the type of carbohydrates and starches to these cows that we're not feeding them like they're hogs like we used to. And I think that the laminitis has gone down significantly.
I guess I would agree with Brad on that note, and also I think we've seen longer foot baths. I think used to have a foot bath that a cow could avoid if she so wanted, but with the longer foot bath, they have to walk through it. I think that's the big thing I've seen.
I think there's been more of a stress on getting feet trimmed more regularly because I think there's been more articles out there. I think there's been more information out there. There've been more farm visits. And I think with a more routine trimming, I think that's what there's been an increase in that versus a decrease in it. I mean, hoof trimmers are busy.
What's the preference on foot table, like tilt table, or do you trim them standing, or yeah, how long my experience is the quicker you can get the job done, the better. My experience has been the quicker you can get the job done, the better. I mean, I've seen trimmers that take a long time, some that use tilt tables, some cows get along well with that, other cows are pretty excitable and are stressed pretty severely.
The first time you put a cow up, if she's not a spoiled brat, she does flare on any table. Now, the people that use the big red machines, I don't know if that's, they raise them up, they thrash a little because it's not normal for them. In my experience is once they've been on there once and you flip them, they know what they're going to come off feeling better, so they don't flail as much. The quicker, my table flips them very quick, so then it's like a deep breath. Before they've got to the last of that deep breath, they're already changed down and they can't move. The other thing is there's different types of cows. If you've got a cow that's got a lot of flesh on, especially on the front, through the shoulder region, they could stay on the table longer without injury. There's a node that runs through the front, the cow will fall asleep. I had the privilege of putting Star Lily on the table a month before she died. She's one of those cows that you had 2 minutes. You flipped her up, you did a straight commercial trim on her, make her comfortable and put her down. No fancy stuff, no digging, no nothing. You have to know your cows, and that only comes with experience. Like 8 years ago, I probably wouldn't have known that, but when you have a cow fall asleep on you, and that just like your leg falls asleep, most of them come out of it, but there's some that don't, and then that's the communication between your client and the hoof trimmer. Okay, this cow we have had a little issue with, well, we just did a DA on her, I know we shouldn't put her on, but her feet are bothering her, which is the correct thing to do, because if you don't get the foot, you're not going to get her to eat. So you're not going to correct the cow. All cows are different, and yes, you want to make it as quick as possible, and you have to have your equipment ready, you have to have your supplies ready, you can't be diddly-dallying around talking to the customer. Talking is in between the cows. You can't. You are correct, Charlie.
Okay, now you mentioned you do trim beef animals. Now, I run a commercial beef animals, and some of these are pretty excitable now. And I got animals that could stand foot trimming. Now, in a situation like that, how do you handle those?
I know Charlie's. I had the privilege yesterday of doing 3 different farm Highlanders that are going to go to the state fair. And if you've got to have patience with a cow, those are it, because their horns are at least 8 inches wider than my chute on each side. And it's fascinating watching them go through. You just have to know the beef. Angus, you better have 10-foot gates and let them just follow through a corral. The white face, well, you can lollygag and they'll just wander in without any issue. You gotta know the breed. Charlet, I'll be doing Charlet next week. You just let the guy do all the voice commands with them, and the trimmer should shut their mouth and just walk away. Because animals are, especially beef over the dairy, they are very owner sensitive, territorial. Don't separate the calf and herd. You're going to put an old cow on, put the calf through the chute first so that she sees it, and then she'll go through. What I've also learned is you can't be stressed. They sense your feeling. If it's a rainstorm, cancel your hoof trimming because they don't travel well the next day. They get excited like we do with thunderstorms. So it's just constant learning. Every day if you don't learn something on the hoof trimming table, you haven't done your job. So.
Thank you, Joyce.
Other questions? Any final thoughts from our panel? This is a great job.